Welcome back, my friends, to AA Recovery Interviews. I'm your host, Howard L., and I'm an alcoholic. Sober since January 1st, 1988, one day at a time. I'm grateful you've joined us. AA Recovery Interviews is the podcast where Alcoholics Anonymous members from around the world share their timeless and extraordinary stories of experience, strength, and hope. There are more than 160 interviews in this podcast series, all of which you can enjoy on aarecoveryinterviews.com and all podcast apps. Today's podcast features my interview with Cody T. from a few weeks after his 4th AA birthday. Cody's story is a tragic tale rooted in a family rampant with alcoholism and drug addiction. Both his parents were hard drug users who sadly never attempted to get sober. Cody used drugs with them on a regular basis, in addition to his own drinking, further complicating any notions that he might be an alcoholic. As booze and heroin addled Cody's decision-making and behavior, he was whipsawed into the consequences that so many alcoholics face, including divorce, DUI convictions, and prison. By the time he was ready for sobriety in 2020, extended time behind bars looked like a foregone conclusion. Fortunately, Cody's divine moment of clarity about his disease materialized, and he found a rehab facility that quite literally saved his life. Sober living residents followed, as did regular AA meetings both inside and outside. With his lifeline firmly tethered to the program, Cody found a sponsor and earnestly worked the steps. As he progressed in his AA recovery, he took on more and more service opportunities, which ultimately resulted in employment at the same recovery center in which he got sober. Tragedy struck 2 years into Cody's sobriety when his father died from a drug overdose, followed by his mother's death just 5 months later. Facing a plunge into relapse, Cody pulled his program fellowship in tightly and survived to share his own critically important experience of staying sober no matter what. I believe Cody's story is one that every recovering alcoholic should hear. The sheer intensity of this cautionary tale lends itself to the importance of always staying the course, both in good times and bad. And so, I'm pleased to present this hour-long episode of AA Recovery Interviews with my friend and AA brother, Cody T.
My name is Cody, and I'm an alcoholic.
Hi, Cody. So glad that you're able to do this interview with me tonight on the AA Recovery Interviews podcast.
Yeah.
And you and I are sitting here after a really great meeting in which I saw you stand up and get your 4-year chip. And I want to congratulate you on that. That's today?
It's November 1st, so it was last Friday.
Last Friday. Yeah. Wow, 4 years.
I know. It's been a journey, Howard.
Well, I remember when you first started coming to the meetings, and 4 years has really flown by quickly, but I'll bet there have been parts of it that have for you too and others that haven't.
Yeah. I wouldn't say it's flown by. I think it feels like it's gone by. I think what you said was correct, right? There are some parts that were tough, right? I lost both my parents in 2022 and to alcoholism. And that part of it kind of flew by, I think. And I never wanted to use drugs during that. You know, I never did. And that's the miracle of this program, right? I never wanted to pick up. I wanted to figure out how to change the way I felt, but I knew that if I used drugs, I'd be dead.
Yeah.
I'd be dead.
And we're going to be talking about that kind of stuff in your life.
Yeah.
And
I'm open to it.
My condolences on the loss of your parents.
Thank you.
And that was a couple years ago now.
Mm-hmm.
When you came into the program, so what is your sobriety date?
It is November 1st of 2020.
What was going on during the last week of October that made you come to AA on the 1st of November?
I actually didn't go to AA on the 1st of November. That's not how it worked.
Okay.
I was sitting in a jail cell. I'd been in and out of AA since I was 16 years old.
Okay.
And I heard some things, right? And I thought it was dumb. I didn't think it was. I didn't think I was an alcoholic, and I thought you guys were crazy. And but I was arrested on July 1st of 2020 for my 4th DWI. I'd sat in jail for 4 months. There's a couple times that people had brought drugs in there. I was working in. It was in this building called JPC, right? It's the new Harris County Jail. It's called Joint Processing Center, and people were bringing drugs in, and I had used them a few times. And it was one day I was just sitting there. I was like, this is it. Like, I'm done. I'm done using drugs. It's either stop right now while you're in jail and try to get better, or just go to prison. Just your life's over, right? I remember just sitting. And I was sitting in my bunk, and I remember thinking, like God, just help me here. Just help me change. I want to change. And I realized I was powerless, man. I remember having that peace that you get. I don't know if you can relate to it, but I remember like, wow, like I'm not in control of this. Like this is a disease.
Yeah.
I'm an alcoholic. The solution is AA. I remember that. They didn't have it going on at that point in time because of COVID. But as soon as I got out, I started going.
So there you are, and you have that moment of clarity,
Mm-hmm.
and you come into AA. It wasn't your first time in AA.
Right.
And I want to talk about that as well. But in Texas, isn't it 3 strikes and you're out when it comes to drunk driving? Well, how could you get 4 DWIs and not be in prison for 20 years?
Well, I got 2 when I was 16, 17 years old.
Okay, so a minor.
Well, that didn't matter. I got my 3rd when I was 26.
Mm-hmm.
Cost a lot of money. I got an attorney,
Mm.
and I got 6 years of probation, which I completed. I didn't stay sober, and I wasn't sober the entire time. I had prescription. Listen, I started drinking, and alcohol was my drug of choice, but it progressed to other things as long as my journey went on. And at that point, I was taking prescription pills and drinking, and I completed that when I was 30 years old, right before I turned 30, I believe.
Were you getting a paper signed?
I was signing it myself.
Just sign it yourself or have somebody else sign
Good.
it. But the whole intent of the court sending you to meetings it's a noble reason,
Yeah.
and it's a very valid reason to do it. But some people who aren't quite ready for AA, even if a judge sentences them to go,
Right.
they're not going to go. But it sounds to me like this is just part of a long journey in a life that's had some issues with alcohol and drugs.
Mm-hmm.
For you to have gone to AA before 16 and earlier. And for most people, it goes back to their family of origin.
Right.
What was going on in your family that might have indicated a future of being a drug addict or alcoholic?
Both my parents were alcoholics. They drank, but prescription drugs were their drug of choice. My dad actually, when he passed away of a heroin overdose, a fentanyl overdose, and that was in 2022. So I was raised in that. I grew up in that. I didn't know that when I was a kid. I didn't realize it, and nobody tells you that. But I remember walking in to the living room and like as a kid and my dad just being passed out, and my mom. I just thought it was normal. I did, and I did a lot on my own when I was growing up. I did a lot, and I started drinking at 12. You know what I mean? Not heavily, but that's when I had my first drink.
Do you have siblings?
I do. I have an older brother, an older sister, and a little sister.
As kids and siblings, I'm talking generally now, sometimes they get together and try and figure out what's going on with mom and dad. Did that ever happen with you?
No, I think it was just we knew they were going to change. My father isn't my sister's father. He is my brother's father, and he's not my little sister's father. So my parents got divorced when I was 9, and then they got remarried when I was 15.
Okay.
So it was kind of just a weird.
Yeah.
My dad. So let me just tell you, my dad was a program director at NASA for 23 years. He worked there, and then my mom worked for Northrop Grumman, and we lived in Friendswood. It was a nice neighborhood. It was a nice house and good area, good school district. So the way I grew up was a little different, right? People using drugs. I felt really naive when I found out, right? Because when I was 15 years old. That's really what got me going hard into drugs. Is my parents got divorced when I was 9 years old. My mom got pregnant. We moved to Kansas City. My stepfather was very abusive to me, and I moved back to live with a couple friends of mine. My next door neighbors in Friendswood growing up. My dad was out of town. He was working for Continental and flying back and forth to see me every week. At 15 years old, I got a car. I convinced my dad to give me a hardship license because he was out of town all the time. So I got a license. I got a truck. I got a bunch of new friends, and I started drinking heavily. And with that truck came new friends, and one of them was like, "Dude, what's wrong with your dad? There's something wrong with him." I know it was normal to me. He was passed out with a cigarette. Benson Hedges Gold 100, just complete all ash. Like he was good at it. I don't know how he did it. He just the entire ash. Crazy. It was. But at that point, when I saw that, it just clicked, and that was it. And I just rebelled because I had lost my mom. I lost like all my family. I was living by myself with my dad, who was an alcoholic, and I quickly when I started drinking, it changed the way I felt. I have to feel that way. So I did it.
So that was at 16?
15 years old.
15, okay. So 15 is a pretty common age for people to first start drinking
Yeah.
on their own accord.
Right.
But you were noticing this behavior in your parents your whole time leading up to that, or was there a certain point at which you started to notice that things were different in your house than it was in other people's?
It was really right about then. That's why I felt so naive. I noticed things, but I thought it was normal. I thought it was normal for them to be tired, and you know what I mean?
But they were working, right?
They were working.
So they were functional,
Yep.
functional drug addicts or functional alcoholics, which makes it doubly hard to quit because everything around you at work finds its way to convince you that you must not be, because you couldn't do this thing if you were really a drug addict. Who could work at NASA if they're a drug addict?
And do as well as he did. He did really well.
And do as well as he did.
And then he got a job with EDS after he left that job, and he did really well there. I mean, he was in charge of that entire project. I mean, and he did well. I mean, he did good. He made decent money my entire life. He had nothing to show for it when he died.
Huh. It all went up his nose or in his arm or whatever. Oh, that's rough. That's a really rough way to grow up.
It was sad. I didn't know any different, right? But whenever, like, to go to their apartment complex after getting sober and being sober around them, and then going to see how they were living, it was like, man, like, this is crazy, right? Like, it's crazy. But I mean, that's what drugs do. I mean, he was calling and borrowing money from me, and I had just got out of jail, right? And I got a job, and I'm moving furniture. I'm not making a bunch of money, but he would call me and ask me for money, and you know, he didn't have any. You know, he spent it all on heroin. It was hard. The last time he asked, and I didn't give it to him a bunch of times. The last time he asked, I said, "I can't do it, Dad, and I'm going to buy you groceries." And I sent groceries to the house, and I bought my mom's prescriptions that week or that month. And
were they living together?
Yeah, they were living together at the end.
How much time between your dad's passing and your mom's?
5 months.
Your dad went first?
Yeah.
From the heroin?
Yeah, I got a call. I was actually going to volunteer for a different nonprofit and help them, and I was going to the warehouse to help them just move some stuff around. It was me and my friend Rusty. He lived at the house with me. We were on our way. We were on the freeway, and I got a call from my mom. This is weird. It's 8 o'clock in the morning, and she's like, "There's something wrong with your dad." And, you know, I told you growing up, he was passed out all the time. So it's not unusual for him to fall asleep and just be out for a long time. And she said, I threw water on him. I've tried everything. I've shaken him. My mom was not in the best health in the mental state. She had 2 brain aneurysms removed in 2018 and just never really recovered. It's hard to do when you're using. But anyway, I said, well, you need to hang up and call 911. Me and my buddy turned around. I got there the exact same time as the fire truck did, and I went, and my dad was laying face down in the apartment, and I rubbed his back. You know what I mean? I said, "Hey, Dad, are you alive?" And you could tell he was dead, and it was sad. It was hard, and you know, but you had to be strong, right? I still got a little sister. Obviously, they don't have the same dad, but you know, she was involved in his life. She loved him, you know, it's to some extent. And my older sister, I called her and let her know she came, and just trying to help my mom.
What a hell of a thing to have happen when you're 2 years sober.
Yeah.
That it happened that soon into your sobriety, and you got through it. To me, that's amazing.
Man, it was God. So I was in the right place, okay? I was living at the house. I was working. I was going to meetings every single day. Jim W. was my sponsor at the time. To be honest with you, I wasn't really focused on the steps and working them well, but I did call him, and we talked. But Nick, I work with him every day, and I talk to him every day. He was really just a key part of that in my life and just helping me, man. It was hard. I was just in a good spot. The community, AA community, recovery's community, just really surrounded me, and I'm grateful for that, for sure.
This was true for me when I first came into AA. I wondered, and maybe this was the disease working behind the scenes, trying to finagle a way that someday I'd be able to go back to drink.
Right.
Because everybody in the meeting was saying, "This is we want you not to drink again, but do it one day at a time." Okay, I got that, and I thought, well, what could possibly happen in my life that might make it okay for me to go drink? What tragedy could befall me? And in the first few years that I had those thoughts, those kind of things didn't happen to me. But I went to meetings and I saw other people for whom that had happened, and they stayed sober, and that gave me the hope. So the fact that you were 2 years in to your sobriety, and this happens to both parents within a very short period of time, and you stay sober, that's nothing short of a miracle.
It's nothing short of a miracle, definitely. And you take it 1 second at a time at that point, right? 1 minute at a time, and I really did. It was you say sometimes it seems like it flew by. Well, that period of it, took its time for sure. And my mom's death really hurt the worst, right? It hurt the worst. She was really my best friend. And I, uh, I miss her every day, every day. She was a sweet lady. And, you know, I couldn't say enough about it. It was funny. I've been listening to. I picked a random station on Apple Music today, and it played three of the songs I listened to growing up with her, and it was good to hear that. It's good to be in a spot today to where I can say that, because 2 years ago when that happened, I would have been crying. It was hard.
A lot of grieving to do with loss of two parents.
On agreement. I went to a grief counselor. 4 months after that, I decided that it was time to go see somebody and talk about my mom and my dad and when I was going through, and I saw them for a year straight. So that was good. It was helpful. It was good. I had, working through a lot more than just grief, right? Like a lot of childhood stuff that trauma because of their alcoholism and me not, it was good.
What were the circumstances around your mother's death?
She had gotten cancer, right? It was and she's been a smoker her entire life. Well, my entire life, right? So I don't long time. She had gotten it was a big nodule on her neck. 2018, she fell. It was Thanksgiving Day. She fell and had a heart attack, and they took her to the hospital. They found 2 brain aneurysms, and they removed them in the next month, right? So by the first of the year, and it's really traumatic, right? You lose motor function, right? She had to learn how to walk again and talk again. And she was really a different person after that. She never really gained all her motor skills back, and 2022 she was about 85 pounds, and she had cancer in her neck, and this is hard for me to talk about. So it was July of 2022, and my dad had just died, and my mom fell and had a seizure at my sister's. She was living with my sister. She moved from that apartment they were living in. My mom and her, my dad and her were living in, and to live with my sister. And no more heroin use, because they were both using heroin when they didn't have their pain medication. No more heroin use, and my sister kind of kept control over pain pills. But my sister had gone to work. My mom fell, hit her head. She was bruised. And she went to the doctor, and the doctor said, "Hey, you got to go to the hospital right away." And they did. She did. And she never really left. So she went into ICU. She was completely functioning, right? I mean, she wasn't able to get out of bed, but she was she could speak and she could laugh. You know what I mean? And
Right.
but 85 pounds. 66 years old. Not really an old woman.
Yeah.
85 pounds, and they eventually moved her from ICU to a regular room. We got an oncologist involved, and they're like, "Okay, so we can cure you. We can cure you. This can go away. We can, and we're just gonna have to do some rehab. You're gonna have to go to this facility afterwards, right?" And they needed to put a feeding tube in because the lump was so big that it went in, that it just she couldn't eat regularly, and I don't know. I noticed her. She didn't want to do it. She didn't want the feeding tube. They did it through her nose, but they wanted to stick one in her stomach. And I remember going home that night, and I noticed that. And I was on my way home with my sister that night from the hospital, and I looked over, and it just kind of dawned on me. It's like, I wonder if Mom wants to do this. Does she want to live? Is this something she wants to fight for, right? Mm-hmm. She just lost my dad, 85 pounds. Had those surgeries. It was, so at that point, the next day I went to the hospital, right? And it was kind of a weird thing. It's weird how it happened. I mean, I went to the hospital. I told my sister, I said, "Listen, I'm going to talk to her. If she doesn't want to do this, there's no point. She's going to have to fight for this. Radiation and all this rehabilitation. Does she want to do it?" And the next day I was like, "Okay, Mom, I love you. I love you. I want the best for you, and I will quit my job and I'll stay here with you and I'll work this with you and we'll do everything. We'll go to rehab. I will do everything I can do to help you if you want to do it. And she decided that she didn't want to do it. She didn't want to live. So I'm thankful I was able to have that conversation with her, sober. I was able to be there and strong for her. And my sister. I don't think my sister could have had that conversation with her. I don't know if she could have. I don't know that she would have. So so like a few hours later, the doctors had noticed this. That my mom wasn't really getting out of bed. She wasn't cleaning herself. And I had a doctor come and say, "Hey, listen, what do you want us to do? You want me to call hospice?" And at that point, I had that conversation with my mom, and I said, "Yeah, I think that's what we're going to have to do." 3 days later, she was dead at my sister's house. I was with her. Me, Sarah. Sarah's my sister, and her husband Randy. And I don't know if you've ever been through a situation where you got to help somebody pass away.
Yeah.
It's a tough thing to do, especially when you love them. And,
I was at my mother's bedside when she breathed her last breath.
Yeah, me too.
Closed her eyes.
Yep. Yep.
And in a way, it was one of the most spiritual experiences in my life.
Me too.
Did you find that?
I did. It was hard.
What I noticed with my mother was, for the first time in her life that I could remember in my life about her, she was finally at peace. She had a look on her face I'd never seen in my entire life, and that was because my mother had just a horrible childhood, and the rest of her life she was tormented and tortured by so many things from the past that she never, ever in my life had anything that resembled peace or acceptance.
Yeah.
And when she breathed her last breath, and I noticed a look on her face I'd never seen before. I thought, that's
great.
She finally got it.
Yeah.
It sounds like something similar to you?
Well, I think the last couple of days I felt that way.
I'll bet.
Because she was, the last day she wasn't awake, but the night before I got to have a little conversation with her, and I was like, "Mom, I love you so much. I'm going to miss you." And she was like, "You finally got it." I was sober.
Yeah.
I think she was waiting for that. I do. And I think if I hadn't been sober, she might have, tried to stay. I'm glad she was able to let go. And it was a hard, but I remember thinking, she's gonna be in a better place. She's safe. She's not struggling. She's not hurting.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And anyways,
and you were in a better place to be able to deal with it. There's some tissues back there if you want one.
Yeah.
About your parents and the fact that you grew up the way you grew up with two parents who were IV drug users.
They didn't use IV.
It wasn't IV?
No, they snorted heroin at the end of their lives, but they wrote their own prescriptions. Yeah, as growing up, my mom got arrested a couple of times for doing that, for writing her own prescription. She wasn't a bad person. She was an addict.
She was an addict.
And you would have never known it, right?
Yeah.
They were bad off. I mean, they were doctor hopping my entire life.
Do you recall what it said on your dad's death certificate, cause of death?
An overdose.
Overdose.
Yeah. I finally got a chance to look at it about a year after he passed away. It went to my uncle, but I got it. So it said he had barbiturates, heroin, cocaine for some reason, methamphetamine, fentanyl, and Ativan in his system. And you don't know what you're doing anymore. I don't think that he was using all those drugs, right? What I think is something came in contact. I think that he was there's probably fentanyl in the heroin and it killed him.
Yeah.
Is what I think.
That's what's doing it.
It's killing everybody.
It's killing a lot of people.
My cousin died in 2019 of a fentanyl overdose. I mean, it's killing so many people. I mean, I don't even know because I don't talk to anybody from my past, but I'm sure it's killed 50% of them.
Was there ever a time at which your parents tried to stop or went to any kind of program or rehab?
When I was growing up, my dad lost his job in NASA. I remember him. I remember a difference in him. Not that he ever went to a program or anything like that, but I remember him. I think he had to stop, right? He couldn't afford it anymore. And then he moved in with his dad when I moved to Kansas City. My mom had to go to rehab while we were in Kansas City because she got caught writing prescriptions. And they forced her. She got caught twice, like really quickly, and they were going to take my little sister away. My little sister was with her at one of the times, and remember coming home and she wasn't home, and I was like, "Where the hell is she?" And they said they made up some lie, and I found out later on that's what happened.
So she might have stopped for brief periods along the way, or was it pretty steady during your whole life?
Yeah, I think it was. I think it was pretty steady my whole life.
It's amazing that she lived as long as she did
Right.
with that kind of drug habit.
Right. Yeah, both of them.
What was going through your mind the very first time you took a drink?
The very first time I took a drink, I think I was in pain. Right. I was living in Kansas City. My mom and my stepdad were there. My stepdad was abusive, and he did not drink. He was not a drinker at all, but he had a bunch of alcohol from different countries that he had traveled to, and I found it and drank it. I feel like new place, parents divorced. I did not like him. He didn't like me, and I found a way to change the way I felt,
And it worked?
and then it worked.
Did he find out about it?
Yeah, eventually he did.
What were the consequences?
Well, he was a physically abusive man, and eventually he beat me so much that I had to move out of there, right? And I moved back in with my dad, right, and their family.
And how old were you?
I was 13 years old.
13 years old.
Yeah.
Okay, so you already knew the relief that alcohol could provide,
Yeah.
But you sought it out whenever you could.
Yeah, well, I didn't, so when I moved back down, I told you I lived with my friends,
Right.
parents, right? So they were Christian people. That's how I got to know the Lord. That's how I got to know
Yeah,
Jesus.
right.
They were Christian people, and I'm very thankful for that time in my life because it gave me structure and boundaries, and I understood like what a real family kind of functioned like, right? People they got up on time, they went to school, like they went to work on, like I never really had that in my life, right? Like, so I didn't use or drink really when I lived with them at all. His dad, he was an alcoholic. He was a dry drunk. He wasn't going to AA meetings or anything like that, but he had been sober for a few years at that point. My buddy's dad, and
So you lived with them.
yeah, for 2 years. Great people, really good people. I actually saw them yesterday.
Did you drink or do any drugs while you were living with them?
No, I didn't.
So for 2 years, how old were you when you went to live with them?
13.
13. Okay, so you go from the situation where you're being badly abused by your stepfather.
Right.
How many years did that go on?
1.5, 2 years.
Okay.
So it wasn't a long time.
So there was a period of 2 years in there where you didn't drink at all.
Right. I played football. I got good grades. I had structure in my life. I had people that naturally gave me structure. It's just part of their. And I did good in that. I thrived in that.
What happened when you were offered alcohol or drugs?
I don't think that I really was. And so I may have been once or twice, but at that point in my life, like I was like, I didn't want it. I never really fit in, or felt like I fit in. I really started drinking and using after 15, 16 to fit in, right? Like I never felt comfortable. So my friend, he had smoked weed. One of the kids I live with, he was smoking weed, and I was telling on him. You know what I mean? I was telling his parents that he was doing that. And I was playing football and doing really well. I was doing really well in sports, but I don't know. I think I really wanted like my mom wasn't there. My dad was out of town. Right, like I wanted my little sister wasn't there. My older sister was gone. I hadn't seen my brother in 8 years, and I think I felt alone and like you know what I mean. And I didn't know how to feel. I was 13, 14 years old. Like what am I doing? You know what I mean?
You just listed about 4 or 5 people, the absence of whom in your life. I can't imagine it doing anything but make you feel alone.
Right. I remember always wanting a real relationship with my older brother. He left the house when I was like 6 or 7 years old, and lived with his mom. And I didn't see him. He didn't live very far away, but I didn't really see him very often. I mean, he never came over and stayed at the house again.
Whatever became of him?
He is not doing too well right now. He's definitely, if he listened to this, he'd be mad at me, but he won't. He's an alcoholic for sure, and I think he's using drugs. I couldn't prove it, but he's not doing too well.
That's tough, especially when you know the situation.
Yeah.
And you're acutely aware of, and you're working in an environment that's involved in helping people get through that. There's a lot of irony here,
Right.
that you're working in an environment helping people who, if only they could be your brother,
Yeah, yeah,
if
yeah.
if only it could be your mother or your father,
Yeah.
I'm sure that hasn't been lost on you along the way.
Sure, and I think you're right, and a big part of my recovery and grief, getting over my parents, is finding purpose in this, finding purpose in helping people. Right?
Yeah.
Okay, like this doesn't have to happen. Like you can do something to change. I'm very thankful to have that in my life. I think if I was working in a warehouse, I probably wouldn't have the sobriety I have today. I'm very thankful for the purpose that the recovery house has given me, for sure.
Yeah, I'm glad for it too. And I've seen you express it in the way you treat people in the program. The cool thing about getting to go to meetings with you and getting to see you around the clubs or in the church meetings like we have is that I get to see you interacting with other people. And to me, that's one of the best ways to, you could tell me how you are
Yeah.
all night long, but if I can have 5 minutes of seeing how you're relating to other people, I can know what's going on.
Right.
And when I see you relating, I see a man whose program is working, but a man who's doing a lot of work to help it work.
Thank you.
Does that make
Yeah,
sense?
thank you. I appreciate that.
I'm glad to see that. So neither of your parents sought out any kind of treatment themselves because they obviously didn't think they had a problem. Or did they know they had a problem and just didn't want to do anything about it?
It's a combo. I think it's both of them together. You know what I mean? I think if they were separate, I put a lot of thought into you think about these things, right? And I think my mom would have probably gotten sober if she wasn't around him. I don't know if he would have, but I think that she would have. Toxic together.
Toxic
Well,
together.
yeah, because you're community, you're together, well, you're okay because you're doing it too, right?
Yeah, toxic together yet functional in the outside world.
Right. It's sad. It's sad.
Were they able to, in the end, were they able to keep their jobs as a result?
No, my dad ended up losing his job and never working again at like 50 years old.
Wow.
Yeah. My mom was able to sustain herself from an inheritance that she got from her mom and one from her dad. When that ran out, it really got bad for him.
When was that?
That was 2018, right when she had those, right when she had those brain injuries. It was just kind of just like the storm, right? And it was sad to watch. And I was using drugs with him at that point too.
Yeah.
So it was a bad situation for all of us. It only got worse for me and them. I mean, they progressed to heroin, and I was using heroin, and it was bad.
Do you remember when you first used drugs with them? Was that around that time?
No. I started using drugs with my parents pretty early on. It didn't start out with heroin, right? It was like smoking weed. My mom, I remember this Hurricane Rita hit back in 2006 or whatever it was. I don't know. And we were smoking weed and taking Vicodin and stuff, you know what I mean? And they had pain pills and they were sharing them with me at that point, right? And when I was 17 years old, I had cancer. I had melanoma, stage 2B, had to have it removed and do a little radiation. And they prescribed me Vicodin, you know what I mean? So I was taking that and I would give that to them. They were taking this thing called Fiorinol. It's a headache medication. It's got caffeine, codeine, and like an Ativan type drug in it. Super addictive, and they abused it. And I used it too. I was never prescribed that, but I did. And we used drugs together probably for a good 5 or 10 years. A long time. To be completely honest with you, that's it.
We'll be right back. My friends, if you're enjoying AA recovery interviews, I invite you to check out my latest audiobook, Alcoholics Anonymous, the story of how more than 100 men have recovered from alcoholism. This is the word-for-word, cover-to-cover reading of the first edition of the Big Book, published in 1939. It's a relaxing yet meaningful and engaging way to listen to the Big Book anytime, any place. Have a free listen at Audible, iTunes, or Amazon. While you're there, search for my other audiobook, Lost Stories of the Big Book, 30 original stories from the first and or second editions missing from the third and fourth editions of Alcoholics Anonymous. It's an engaging audiobook that brings these stories to life for AA members who've never seen them. These timeless testimonials were originally cut to make room for newer stories in the third and fourth editions. but their vitally important messages of hope are as meaningful today as they were when they were first published. Many listeners will hear these stories for the very first time. It's also available from Amazon as a Kindle book or in paperback if you'd like to read along. You're going to love it. And we're back. It's a extraordinary story in a lot of ways, because when you or I are talking to people about their drug habits or even about their parents' drug habits, very seldom will I see situations where the parents don't want the kid to stop necessarily, and they're sharing it, and
They didn't want me to stop.
they didn't.
Well, not that they didn't think it was a problem. It's a coping mechanism, right? This is how you deal with life. Like when you get sad, when you're angry, when here's Atiman, you know what I mean? Like that's the way it was growing up.
Along the way, tell me about any times that you second-guessed that or looked at it and said, this can't possibly be right, but then you went on and did it anyway.
Well, I mean, so Howard, I went to prison at 18 years old, right?
Uh-huh.
And when I got out of prison, I was mad at all the situation, at them, and my life. I felt like I had ruined it, right? Like there's no purpose. They had given me no direction. Like most kids were in college, and I was sitting in prison in Beaumont, right? Like, and I was so.
And how long were you there?
A year and a half.
Year and a half, okay.
And
so the world's going on around you, and you're not part of it.
Yeah, and I got out, and I went back to the same situation, and I started doing the same things. But I was angry.
So prison wasn't the pause for thought that many people hope it will be.
Not when you're that age. I wasn't mature enough, right? Looking back, right? I wasn't an adult. Who's an adult at 18 years? I don't think many people really are, right? It's time to grow some more and go to college and figure out what you want to do with your life. And, at that point, I felt like my life had ended. And I was so mad. So I didn't want to stop using drugs. I didn't want to stop. I never wanted to, not till this last little moment, not till this last time.
So a number of the people I've interviewed who've been to prison have mentioned the fact that you can get all the drugs you want while you're inside.
Sure. Yeah.
So is that the case?
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's not like the year and a half you were there, you didn't do any drugs.
No, I drank and used while I was there. Right. I mean, and it's not like on a regular basis, but I had commissary, which is, how you buy things, and it's a whole world there. There's a whole ecosystem. I mean, like it's different, and I don't see a whole lot of recovery going on in prison.
Your sentence versus the parole. What was your original sentence?
It was a year and a half. So I did state jail. So state jail is prison, right? So when you go to state jail, you do the entire time. You don't get parole. You have to complete your entire sentence. So the good thing about state jail is you get out and you don't have parole. The bad thing is you can't get any good time. So like you can get in a fight, or you can get caught selling drugs, or you can get caught with a cell phone, and they're not going to give you any more time because they can't. The max is 2 years.
So there's not a whole lot of incentive to not do that kind of stuff.
Exactly. Yeah, it was a scary time in my life.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I was a kid,
Did it ever occur to you during the time that you were serving in prison that when you got out, you were going to change your life?
No, not at that point in my life. I mean, not that I recall. Right? I don't ever I don't remember having that clarity that I did this last time. I don't remember thinking like I want to be different. I remember just being so mad. That's what I remember. I just being just angry, just like tense and afraid because I was scared. There's grown men. I'm 18 years old and I was scared, right?
What means of hope did you have while you were in prison?
I had a couple of visits from my parents, you know what I mean? Like, and my older sister has really been a real rock in my life. I'm thankful for her. She still is. I love her. Other than that, not much. I just wanted to get out of there. I remember writing letters to my attorney thinking, like, I want to kill you for letting me go here. But I made some bad decisions, right? You DWI. So, no, here's how it went down, right? I got caught with an ounce of crystal meth in my car. It wasn't mine. It was in my truck.
Mm-hmm.
It was in individual bags in Webster, Texas. 7 a.m. We're in a neighborhood. I got pulled over. 5 cops pulled their guns on us, and got arrested with some drugs in my pocket. Ended up going to jail, getting bonded out. They only charged me with the drugs I had in my pocket because they couldn't prove that those drugs were in my truck. Those were mine, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then I got 2 DWIs within like 3 months. Just like bam, bam. And I got, before I was ever sentenced to any of that, my first sentencing was for the controlled substance, right? So I got arrested for that first and 2 DWIs. Then I went to court, was put on probation.
So there was no time with the first 2 charges?
Right. I ended up screwing my probation up because I was smoking weed and doing drugs and I'm not passing drug tests. So when I went back to court, my judge was like, "Hey, I didn't know you had 2 DWIs too." Like, you know what I mean? So like, we'll see you later. You're going to prison. And then when I got, it was in 3 different counties. So Brazoria, Galveston, and Harris County. So when I got out, I had to go to court in Brazoria County and then in Galveston County. They both gave me time served, but it was, you didn't know.
That's amazing that you made it through all that, but yet you didn't come out with any hope or desire to change your life.
I didn't.
Yeah, that's where the system kind of fails. AA sometimes brings meetings into prisons.
They do.
Did you notice any of that when you were in some?
Yeah, I wasn't really a part of it. They did have, there's church groups and there's AA meetings. Not something that I really wanted to be a part of at that point in my life.
So tell me about your experience with AA. I know you talked about during your parole you had to have a paper signed.
Yeah.
Well, tell me about the times that you did have some interface with AA and what your thinking was at those times.
First time I was 16 or 17 years old before I ever went to prison, right? They required me to go. I went to AA. I didn't really pay attention. I didn't think I had a problem. You know what I mean? I didn't, like, not me. Why would I have a problem?
Do you remember the meetings, though? I mean, in tonight's meeting, what was interesting was there was a new guy, and everybody was focused on him. And I was thinking one of 2 things: he's either feeling super
Uncomfortable.
uncomfortable,
Right.
or super special.
Right, right. It's either one or the other, right? Because
Right.
that's what you are. You're 2 different types of alcoholics, right?
And every now and then people go to their first meeting of AA,
Yeah.
and they are so taken with it that they just think, man, I'm arrived, I'm home.
Wasn't me.
That wasn't
No,
you.
that was not me. That was not me. I felt super uncomfortable in those meetings. I didn't want to share. I didn't feel. I wasn't raised to talk about my feelings that way. I thought it was stupid. I didn't know how to do it. I didn't know how to articulate it, and I'm not sure I knew how I was feeling. Right? I didn't know. First meetings I went to, I think I went to a couple of meetings. There's this place called, it's the Bay Area Club I went to a few times. And I don't know the name of this group, but it was in Cleveland, Texas. It's where I got my first sponsor, Ronald. And he's a good guy, but I wasn't ready.
Did you fake it for a while, or?
Then?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I picked up a chip and I lied in meetings. I was a kid. I was 19 years old, right? Or 17 or whatever. I didn't know. And I had to go to meetings, and my mom was like trying to encourage me, so I would go. And even though she was not living well, and
That must have seemed awful hypocritical.
it sure was. It was hypocritical. And you come home to that, and you never know what you're going to get. You're going to get the person withdrawing. You're going to get the person that's super happy. You know what I mean? So, like, when she's happy, you get whatever you want. When she's withdrawing, you got to do a lot of things you wouldn't want to do. And so, I don't know. I'm so thankful for this program. I'm just so thankful for the solution of Alcoholics Anonymous, because, there's really, I didn't have hope for a long time. I didn't want to, I didn't want to kill myself, Howard, but I didn't want to live. You know what I mean? I mean, how could you, I had a couple felonies, right? Like, I'm, at this point, I'm an IV drug user, right? I got a 6-year-old little girl now, right? And I lost, like, she's not anywhere to be found. And I mean, she is now.
Yeah.
But
with your ex.
Yeah. I had no hope. There was no hope. And, I will say that I believe that my recovery has been gradual over the past 4 years. It hasn't, the way that I when I got out this past time and I started going to AA, I didn't really hit the ground running. But I do remember this. I went to the Wheelhouse to a meeting down. It was a Friday night speaker meeting, and I was talking to a guy, and I don't know his name. I told him a little bit of what was going on with me. He's like, you know what? Fear won't keep you sober. Obviously, I know that now,
Yeah.
right? But I didn't know it then, and that stuck with me. You know what I mean? Because I was scared at that point because I'd gotten out. I was still facing 5 to 10 years in prison for my 14 WI. In 6 months, I went to court. So for that. So it was just like, I was scared, dude. I remember going to the recovery house and being super grateful and feeling like, okay, this is going to be hard. This is going to be hard, right? I don't have anything, Howard. I didn't have clothes. All I had was a social security card. I didn't have an ID. I didn't have anything.
And this is after your sobriety date?
Yeah, this is after my sobriety.
Okay, so you come into AA this time, this part of the 4 years, and you had nothing.
Nothing, nothing. It's the way it should be. So I feel like God did that for me. I feel like the Lord did that. You know, you clean it all away, everything.
Give you a fresh slate to work with, right?
And it's the way it felt. You know what I mean? It's the way it felt. And this time I was like, you know what? I'm going to do it. You know, I'm going to do it. And I felt determined. I was scared too, but I knew that the drugs I were using, Howard, I'd be dead. It'd be dead. The way I was using them and the things that are going on today.
It's just a matter of time till you hit the fentanyl cut or whatever, right?
Yeah, exactly. And I knew that. So there's no choice for me. It's sober or dead. That's the way I think, and I think most of us do, really.
Yeah, and that is the kind of fear it's not so much the fear that keeps you sober with that realization, but just the reality of it.
Yeah, I don't know that it scares me. That doesn't scare me. What was scaring me at that point was going to prison. Like if I messed up at that point, I would have gone to prison because I still hadn't been sentenced to probation. I've accepted the fact that I can't use drugs anymore. I don't want to. Right? I don't know. It doesn't occur to me. Like, I don't think about it. Like, it's not something it's the phenomenon they talk about. You don't think about it. You know?
Well, plus you're doing the work. I mean, the fact is that when we're doing the work, there isn't a whole lot of time for thinking about that kind of
Right.
stuff.
True.
If I'm just 24 hours from my next meeting, or in the case of today, I went to a meeting this morning, I'm at a meeting this evening.
Right.
Even with almost 37 years, still the opportunity for me to think about that kind of stuff that'll take me off track is greatly cut down by the fact that I'm in a meeting. Right. And sometimes the meeting is the best thing of the day.
Yeah.
And it has to be enough to keep me centered.
Yeah.
I wanted to ask you about, given your experience when you first came in, being young and so forth, I'm talking about back when you tried AA and it didn't work. Okay. Knowing what you know now, can you imagine what might have been said to you or how you might have been approached that would have made a difference to you at that point? And how do you address that when you see that in meetings with a new guy?
That's a good question. I think that's an important question. I don't feel like I was completely welcomed in and with open arms, okay?
Really?
I don't. Not when I first went. I was probably lying. You know what I mean? I wasn't telling the truth. They could probably tell. And I didn't. I was probably saying things that didn't align with being desperate and wanting to change. You know what I mean? But, you know, you talk about home groups. You think about home groups. Like, I went to that club in Cleveland for quite a bit because I really didn't have much to do. Just a different culture up there. A little different. You know, this is different from a meeting like this. You know, to be honest with you, it was me more than anything. That you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like, what would I do different? You know, you just try to let people know that, you know, there's a solution. Like, this is the answer. And if you want it, you can have it. You know what I mean? And give them your number and let them know that they can call anytime, you know? Like,
so the Cody of today goes back to talk to the Cody that was in those meetings. What does the Cody of today say to the Cody of those meetings that might have made a difference?
This is the solution. You know, this is it.
And, of course, you're getting all the pushback from the Cody that you were.
Yeah, I just try to be a friend to him, you know, because, you know, with my job and with how I see people now, you see different, just like it's funny how you say the Cody of, because, you know, you do see different perspectives of different growth and different people. So I do see myself in these people. I do see myself in Paul and, you know, different guys that come in. It's funny, you know, you just try to let them know that you care about them and you want to help them, and you'll do that. It's going to be okay. Like, you know what I mean? And kind of try to relate to their story a little bit.
Have you been in Houston the whole 4 years that you've been sober?
Yes, sir.
I'm trying to think back to the first time I might have met you or saw you in the meeting. You were a pretty scary looking dude at that time.
Yeah.
Has anybody ever said that to you or told you that?
Quite a few people have told me that, yeah.
But you've softened up so nicely.
Thank you.
I mean that.
I appreciate
sincerely.
That. That makes a lot.
I know so many people who've been through so much, and they're so bitter and so angry and so everything else, so totally lost when they get here. over time it smooths out
Yeah.
and it gets easier to make progress.
Yeah.
I think the fact that you're working in the recovery space out there, it keeps it in your face and on your mind
Yeah.
and in your heart
Yeah.
in a way that if you were working in an auto repair shop, you might not get.
No, because you say things that you would want to hear, right? Just like we were talking about, right? When you see somebody that walks in the door, I remember walking in that door and like not knowing, to the recovery house that I lived in, and just like I don't know these people. What what's gonna, but just making people feel at home, and
How long were you in there?
like 3 years.
And during that time, were you actually working for them? When did you start actually?
For 2 years, I was. So it got in January 27th of 2021, and started working as a house manager about 6 months in.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah, I didn't want to do it.
Why not?
Because I wanted to make some money and move. You hear the thing, well, I'm going to get a job. I'm going to save some money. Like, well, if you put your recovery first, you'll be okay. But nobody knows that, right? Nobody, you have to learn that.
Do you think that would have been pretty risky if you had decided at 2 years, I'm going to go out there and get the high-paying job?
I mean, yeah, I think it would have been detrimental. I don't think I would have made it. I definitely wouldn't have the sobriety I have today.
Would have jeopardized your sobriety.
Yeah, because I was going through so much. In 2 years, just my parents, the way things have happened, you just got to believe in God, right? It's just been a miracle the way the things have just lined up since I've gotten sober. It's like one thing after another, right? I pray, I quit using drugs. I go to court January 26th of 2021, and they let me out of jail. I hadn't spoken to an attorney the entire time I was in jail, right? I had no money. I didn't have a bond before that. I couldn't pay a bond. They let me out. I think there were 10,000 people in Harris County Jail, Howard.
Yeah,
right?
It's overcrowded.
So it was overcrowded, right? They let 32 people out, and I was one of them. And I got into a sober living, right?
Almost immediately.
Well, I called from jail. I called him from jail. I was like, listen, I need to stay sober. I need to get in here. He gave me a scholarship because I didn't have any money.
See, and I know Nick. I knew Nick when he first got sober, and he's such a good man.
Saved my life.
I could see how you guys connected in a way that would have been spiritually wholesome for him and spiritually wholesome for you. So that's so good to see that connection because you get to see it really close up.
Yeah.
I want to ask you about what I guess I would call the occupational hazard of being a sober member of Alcoholics Anonymous working in the recovery space.
I'll tell you. Well, you take your work as your recovery, right? If I sponsor guys, or if I take the phone call from my coworker and think of it as a phone call like I would have with my sponsor, it just doesn't work. You know what I'm saying? Like, you have to go to AA meetings because you want to go to AA meetings. You got to go there. What has been hard for me, Howard, is knowing that everybody knows the recovery place I work for and feeling comfortable sharing anyways, right? I'm doing better at it, but it's been hard to do that. And it's a form of isolation. It's an addiction thing. And I know that you guys are my friends. I know that I should feel comfortable completely sharing in front of all you guys. I'm growing into it. I don't think I'm 100% there, but
No, I get it. But what you're saying is so important because there's the sense that I'm working around other alcoholics all day long.
Right.
I don't want to go to another meeting.
It's not going to keep you sober.
That's not going to keep you sober. We know that for a fact because of so many people who worked in recovery who are now not in recovery, many of whom might be dead.
Right.
The other thing is sitting in a room of Alcoholics Anonymous. You're working for the recovery center, and you're listening to people who you are absolutely sure you could help.
Yeah.
How do you keep from, where's the line between reaching out professionally and keeping AA and your job completely separate?
It's tough. It's something I've learned. It's not something that I started off doing well. Like Paul tonight, I could have easily said, and so many people like him, right? Like, hey, listen, you come to, we can get you going. Like, this is what you know what I mean? Like, but we got to remember that I'm not the savior of everybody, right?
Well, that's
you know
true.
what I'm saying? Like, I got to remind myself of that sometimes, and like I can be helpful if he wants it. If he reaches out, I'll absolutely probably put him in a house, right?
Well, one of the biggest stumbling blocks to us, of course, is our own egos.
Right.
Now, I had another situation where I was being asked to take the message of a particular recovery organization that I was on the board of at one point. And because they knew how involved I was in AA, they, in a number of different ways, asked me, very indirectly, but I knew I was being asked, to try and steer some people from AA into their services.
Right.
I said I can't do that. But if I'm sitting in a meeting and somebody says, my kid really needs help or whatever else, or I'm going to die if I don't get some help, well, that may be the point at which I would cross the line and say, there's an organization that might be able to help you. There are plenty of other organizations, and put it out there. Now, if somebody approaches me and says, aren't you on the board of that organization?
Right.
Yeah, I am. Do you need to know something more about it? And then I would give them the phone number, or I would give them my contact over there to try and keep it separate, because the minute AA starts to get infiltrated with, and I've seen it happen, and it's unfortunate to see it happen. On the other hand, for you to sit there and feel like you can't share because people might construe it as you giving some sort of latent message that you that's mixed in with the business end of your life.
Yeah, there's that, and it's like, then I don't want to hurt the business with being wide open. You know what I mean? I'm getting better at it. You know what I mean? It's just, you got to grow into it. You know what I mean?
And you watch a guy like Nick. You stay close to him. I think he's done a really good job. Of that over the years. Yeah, okay. He comes in with the T-shirts that has the name of the organization on it,
Yeah.
And I was thinking, but whenever he does that, I thought, well, people come in with T-shirts saying all kinds of different stuff.
I wear the shirt to Outpost all the time.
Yeah, that's fine.
And here's the thing, like, there are so many people in need, right?
Yeah.
They're going to find you if they, you know what I mean?
Yeah, they are.
We're getting phone calls all day long, but you know what I mean? Like, I don't need to go to an AA meeting to do it. You know what I mean? Like, you don't need to do it.
I would rather err on the side of saying too much than saying not enough,
Yeah, that's fair.
Like, if I see somebody who needs help,
Yeah.
I would rather err on, coming right out and maybe crossing the line. But it takes time. It takes years of being around and having the experience and being around other people who are doing it.
Right.
But it sounds to me like you've got a pretty decently separated boundary.
Yeah. It took me moving out of the organization, of the house. It's helpful to learn a balance in life, because, when you work where you live, it can be difficult.
Yeah. Now, how old are you now?
I'm 39.
39.
Yes, sir.
Okay, so you've got a really good portion of your life ahead of you. We were sitting in the meeting tonight. There were several guys who spoke who said they didn't get sober until their late 50s and 60s and that sort of thing. I got sober when I was just about ready to turn 31. You're sponsoring some men now?
I have a kind of a sponsee, trying to. You know how it goes sometimes.
I do know how it goes. Of course, after a meeting like tonight, somebody says, we're going to come up to you and give you our numbers. And then, the guy never calls, right? Okay, we know that.
Right.
But I'm apt to tell people, go talk to that guy after the meeting. He's been showing up here. He looks like he needs some help or whatever. But I will make a commitment to you that if I see you at Outpost or at this meeting and I meet a man who needs a sponsor, I'm going to say, Cody, come over here.
Thank you.
I've done that a lot over the years. People say, what, are you some kind of sponsor broker? And I say, no. But guys need to be put together.
They do.
Because just looking at a man, I can't look at you and know whether or not you make a good sponsor. But if somebody who's really close to me comes up and says, I know this guy, he's got a great sponsor, and his sponsor's got a great sponsor.
Will K, he's my sponsor.
Will K couldn't ask for a better sponsor. Every time I hear him share, I think about how great it is that he has such a powerful presence with the guys that he sponsors, and he's very fundamental about the way he works the program.
I would not be where I am today without him. There's no doubt. I mean, he met with me almost every single day. And we went through the book together, and very grateful for that. And I hope and pray that one day that I'm able to walk a man through the big book like he walked me through, and just understand the words and all the things.
Well, we sponsor other people to keep ourselves sober and to teach them how to sponsor other people.
He did a good job.
So you've got a sponsor, your sponsor's got a sponsor, and you're available.
Yep. I don't think that I am a very approachable person, to be honest with you, unless you know me, right? To somebody that's got 2 days sober, I'm probably not. And I appreciate you saying that. Took me, being in the program for a while to ask Will. You know what I mean?
Well, yeah, because you see all the guys he's sponsoring, and you're thinking he's got to be so busy and everything else, and he is.
Yeah.
He's busy working with guys, and he's been that way all along. And I've known his sponsors over the years, Bob B. and Dick K. And those guys are just.
Yeah.
I don't know if you ever got to meet Dick before he passed.
No, I don't think so.
Yeah, he was a good guy. But so it sounds like you're pretty well satisfied with AA. Is that a fair assessment?
100%.
100%.
Yeah, no doubt. Like this is his way of life, and I see it now. And you got to work a program to understand what that means, but I get it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? You got go to a meeting every day, talking with people. Talking with your sponsor. Talking with other alcoholics. I mean, the fellowship. I don't have one friend out of Alcoholics Anonymous. I mean, I have two, right? And I grew up with them. I lived in their house when I was 13 years old, right? So that's it.
And you didn't drink when you were around them.
Right. Exactly.
Isn't that ironic?
Right.
That the friends from the past.
Right.
I've seen guys try and keep friends from the past, and it oftentimes just doesn't work for that well.
I just don't think I relate to them anymore.
It's hard.
I think I'm grown. You know what I mean? To be honest with you. And honestly, I just don't have any reason to go back and do that. You know what I mean? I just don't.
But the cool thing is that they know that you're in AA. Maybe you have, maybe you haven't let them know if they need help. You know people
Absolutely.
in the program who can help.
I've had a few people reach out, and it's been pretty cool.
You never know when you're going to strike that fish,
Right.
when just about the time you're reeling it in and you realize, yeah, that guy needs my help, and I'm the guy to help him. And the help might just be passing him on to somebody else.
Yeah, I'm not going to sponsor my friends growing up, right? So,
Right,
yeah, I've had a
right.
good one, and I've done that. And, it's really up to the person at that point. Do they want it?
It's a great experience,
Yeah.
and it's up to our higher power to put the parties together. Well, Cody, this has been a really great time for us to get together and sit down, and for me to get to know you and you to get to know me. But I wanted to thank you so much for doing this and taking the time.
Thanks for asking me.
And you're welcome. And for being so upfront and honest in your describing your life and what challenges you faced. And frankly, I think it's a miracle that you're sober, from the standpoint that what you are is a demonstration that people can get through what you went through and still stay sober.
Yep.
You're that guy.
Yeah.
So that's the story that needs to be known to others.
Yeah.
To be able to walk up to a man who's suffered some of the defeats, some of the tragedies that you have, and say, I know exactly how you feel because I was there. That, to me, it's like God tapping the guy on the shoulder. So
It's a gift. And I'm very thankful. That's where the purpose is, right? You go into prison, parents that are addicts, right? The death, right? And being able to relate to that, being able to talk to somebody and say, hey, listen, I get what you're going through right now. I'm very thankful for that.
Now, are you able to see your daughter?
I do.
How often do you see her?
I don't have a regular schedule, but I see her probably twice a month.
What a gift that must
My
be.
God,
she's 6 and you're 4 years sober.
Yep. I'm going to show you a picture after this. She's a beautiful girl.
That's wonderful.
Man.
Well, congratulations on that.
Thank you.
And knowing that she's got a sober dad is just one of the greatest gifts you could ever give her.
Yeah. Her mom's on her way to prison. And
that's a shame.
But hopefully it'll change her life.
Is she going to be staying with...
she lives with her grandmother.
With the grandmother, okay. Thank God for grandparents.
Oh, my goodness, yeah.
Yeah. So...
Cool.
Okay, brother. Thanks again.
Good.
Well, my friends, that's a wrap for today's episode of AA Recovery Interviews. I want to thank my guest, Cody T, for sharing his story, and thank you for tuning in. If you have enjoyed the interviews in this podcast series, please share it with others. This show is another helping hand of AA we can all extend to alcoholics everywhere. If you want to contact me directly with any comments, questions, or suggestions, simply email howard@aarecoveryinterviews.com. Please also take a minute to leave a rating and review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and the YouTube Music app. By the way, this podcast strictly adheres to AA's 12 traditions and all General Service Office guidelines for safeguarding anonymity online. I pay all production costs, and no one receives financial gain from the podcast. AA Recovery Interviews and my guests do not speak for or represent AA at large. This podcast is simply my way of giving back to AA, that which has been so freely given to me. The next episode of AA Recovery Interviews is on the way, so keep coming back. It'll be here soon.